10 everyday things Americans did in the 60s that vanished forever. Picture this: January 1965, Main Street, Anytown, USA. Your thermometer reads 34 degrees, and you're standing outside Woolworth's Five and Dime, waiting for it to open at 9 a.m. sharp. Lyndon Johnson is president. I Can't Help Myself by the Four Tops is climbing the charts. Your neighbor just bought a brand new Ford Mustang for $2. $3.68. Gas costs 31 cents a gallon. A first-class stamp is 5 cents. Your father makes $6,000 a year and considers himself solidly middle class. But here's what nobody tells you about 1965. The entire fabric of daily life operated on systems that would be completely unrecognizable 60 years later. Not just technology, but the fundamental patterns of how humans moved through their days, how they connected with each other, how they spent their time when they weren't working. You couldn't Google something. You couldn't text your friend to say you'd be late. You couldn't stream a movie or order food with an app. But those absences didn't make life simpler. They made it different, structured differently, timed differently, connected differently. What you're about to hear isn't nostalgia. It's archaeology. These are 10 completely ordinary things that Americans did every single day in the 1960s. Things so common they seemed permanent, that have now vanished so completely that people under 40 literally cannot imagine them. Not things that changed, things that disappeared. Number 1. Waiting by the phone for a call you couldn't miss. Sarah Martinez was 17 in 1967, a senior at Roosevelt High in San Diego. Every Thursday at 7 p.m., her boyfriend Tom would call from Camp Pendleton, where he was stationed before shipping to Vietnam. She couldn't carry the phone with her. The phone was attached to the kitchen wall with a 15-foot cord at best. So at 6:45 p.m. every Thursday, Sarah would position herself in the kitchen. Her mother knew not to use the phone. Her younger sister knew not to pick up the extension in the bedroom. The whole family scheduled around those calls. If you weren't home when someone called, they couldn't leave a message. There was no voicemail, no answering machine. The phone would ring, and if nobody answered, that was it. The call was lost. Think about what that meant practically. If you were expecting an important call, a job offer, news about a family member in the hospital, a call from someone traveling, you couldn't leave your house. You were tethered to that specific device, in that specific location. Teenagers would have elaborate systems. I'll call you at 8. If you weren't there at 8, your friend would try again at 8:15, then 8:30, then give up. Plans fell apart constantly because of missed phone calls. Phone calls were events. You prepared for them. You sat down. You focused. The idea of walking around a store while having a phone conversation would have seemed like science fiction. Long-distance calls cost real money, sometimes several dollars per minute. Families would set timers. You have 5 minutes. You'd hear the urgency in people's voices on long distance, trying to communicate everything important before the minutes added up. Sarah's Thursday calls from Tom rarely lasted more than 10 minutes. Not because they didn't have more to say, but because they couldn't afford it. Each call cost him nearly a week's military pay. When Tom was killed in Khe Sanh in February 1968, Sarah wasn't home. The military called at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. Her mother answered. Sarah was at her after-school job at the drugstore. She came home at 5:30 to find her mother sitting in the dark kitchen, crying, having sat there alone for 3.5 hours waiting for Sarah to come home so she could tell her. That's what waiting by the phone meant. Number 2. Memorizing phone numbers, dozens of them. Ask anyone over 60. How many phone numbers do you remember from the 1960s? They'll rattle off 10, 20, sometimes more. Their best friend's number, their grandmother's number, the pizza place, the pharmacy, their father's work number. You had to memorize them. There was no other option. Phone books existed, of course. Thick yellow and white page directories delivered to every house. But you couldn't carry a phone book with you. And if you were at a payphone, you needed to know the number or have it written down. Children memorized their home phone number as early as they memorized their address. Schools taught it as a basic safety skill. If you get lost, find a phone and call home. 7 digits. That was it in most places until the late 1960s, when area codes became mandatory for all calls. Robert Chen, who was 12 in 1964, still remembers. Twilight 84392. That was his grandmother's number in San Francisco. Twilight was the exchange name. Each two-letter prefix corresponded to numbers on the dial. TW equals 89. So the full number was 8984392, but everyone said Twilight 84392. Compare that to now. How many phone numbers do you actually know? Your own, maybe. Your spouse's, possibly. Most people under 40 can't recite their own parents' cell phone numbers because they're just saved under mom and dad. Knowing someone's number by heart meant something. It meant you called them often enough to have internalized their number. It was a measure of closeness. Your best friend's number lived in your fingers. You could dial it in the dark, without thinking, muscle memory guiding you. The phone number you grew up with stayed with you for life. 40 years after leaving his childhood home, 60 years after his grandmother died, Robert Chen can still dial Twilight 84392 in his sleep. Number 3. Going to the bank during bank hours or not having cash. Friday 4:45 p.m., First National Bank, Des Moines, Iowa. The line stretches nearly to the door. Everyone just got paid, literally. Paychecks, physical pieces of paper that had to be deposited or cashed before you could access your money. The sign on the door says, Lobby hours, Monday through Friday 9 a.m. to 3 p.m., drive-through until 5 p.m. If you didn't make it to the bank by 5 p.m. on Friday, you had no access to your money until Monday morning. No ATM, no mobile deposit, no Venmo, no Apple Pay, cash, check, or you didn't buy anything. This is 1966. The first ATM won't appear in America until 1969 in New York, and they won't become common until the 1980s. Credit cards exist, but are rare. In 1966, fewer than 5% of Americans have one. Debit cards don't exist yet. Margaret Sullivan worked as a nurse at Mercy Hospital in Baltimore. She got paid every other Friday. Her shift ended at 3:30 p.m., but by the time she changed out of her uniform and drove to her bank, it was usually 3:45 or 4 p.m. The lobby was closed. The drive-through had a line 30 cars long. If she didn't cash her check Friday, she'd have to wait until Monday. But she needed to buy groceries. Her kids needed lunch money for the week. The rent was due. So every other Friday, Margaret would sit in that drive-through line for 45 minutes, sometimes an hour, just to cash a check. Think about what bank hours meant for working people. Banks were open 9 to 3, Monday through Friday. If you worked 9 to 5, you had exactly 2 options. Take time off work to go to the bank, or use your lunch break, and pray the line wasn't too long. Cash was king. If you were going on vacation, you went to the bank beforehand and withdrew enough cash for the entire trip, hundreds of dollars, sometimes thousands, and carried it with you. No ATMs at your destination. No way to access your money once you left town. Going to the bank was a weekly ritual for millions of Americans. You'd wait in line, see your neighbors, chat with the tellers who knew you by name. How's your daughter doing at college? Is your husband feeling better? That personal relationship with bank tellers mattered. If you needed to deposit a check but couldn't physically get to the bank, you'd sometimes call and ask if you could mail it, and they'd do you a favor and backdate the deposit because they knew you and trusted you. Number 4. Watching what was on TV when it was on. Thursday, 7:58 p.m. The Davis family in Milwaukee is gathered in the living room. At exactly 8 p.m., the NBC Peacock appears on their television screen. The announcer says, "It's 8 o'clock. Stay tuned for Star Trek." If you weren't sitting on that couch at 8 p.m., you missed it. No recording, no streaming, no on-demand, no pausing. Star Trek aired Thursdays at 8 p.m. from 1966 to 1969. If you wanted to watch it, you structured your entire week around that time slot. You came home from work. You ate dinner early or late. You didn't make plans for Thursday nights. Think about what that meant culturally. The entire country was synchronized. When 50 million people watched the finale of The Fugitive on August 29, 1967, they watched it at exactly the same moment. The next day at work, at school, at the grocery store, Everyone was talking about the same thing they'd seen the night before. There was no spoilers because everyone watched together. 3 networks: CBS, NBC, ABC. That was it for most Americans. Cable TV wouldn't become common until the 1980s. In 1965, the average American home received 7 channels, and 3 of them were the same shows. Your television had no remote control. You got up and walked to the TV to change the channel. You turned a dial that clicked through channels 2 to 13. If your TV wasn't working right, you adjusted the antenna. 2 metal rabbit ear antennas sat on top of the TV, and you'd move them, tilting and rotating, trying to reduce the static and clear up the picture. Television stations signed off at night, usually around midnight or 1 a.m. The national anthem would play, then the screen would show the test pattern, then static. No 24-hour programming. If you couldn't sleep at 3 a.m., television wasn't an option. Saturday mornings were for children. Cartoons from 7 a.m. to noon. Kids would wake up early, pour a bowl of cereal, and sit inches from the TV watching Bugs Bunny, The Jetsons, Scooby-Doo. Parents slept in. But here's what's lost. You couldn't rewatch. If you missed an episode, it was gone. Shows didn't rerun regularly until summer reruns, when networks would replay the season's episodes. TV Guide was essential, a weekly magazine that listed every show on every channel with descriptions. It cost 15 cents. Millions of Americans bought it religiously. You'd sit down Sunday evening with TV Guide and a pencil and circle the shows you wanted to watch that week. Special programs were events. When A Charlie Brown Christmas aired in December 1965, if you missed it for an entire year. No recording it, no finding it online. Wait until next December and hope they air it again. Number 5. Finding addresses with paper maps, actually getting lost. You're invited to a party in a neighborhood you've never been to. The host gives you an address. Now figure out how to get there. No GPS, no smartphone, no MapQuest, no Google Maps. You have 4 options. Look it up in a paper map, call the host and have them give you turn-by-turn directions which you write down, memorize the directions, or drive around until you find it. Most people did all 4 and still got lost. Every car had a map, usually several maps. City maps, state maps, regional maps, folded awkwardly and stuffed in the glove compartment. If you were driving to a new city, you'd stop at a gas station and buy a map. They cost 50 cents to $1. Reading a map while driving was a 2-person job. The driver drove. The passenger navigated. The navigator would unfold this enormous paper map across their lap, trying to find where you were going, and the route between them. You'd miss the turn. You'd have to turn around. Or you'd keep going and try to figure out an alternate route. The navigator and driver would argue. "I told you it was maple." "You said spruce." Getting lost was normal, expected, built into travel time. If you were going somewhere new, you left an extra hour for getting lost. People would say, "Give yourself time to get lost," and everyone understood. Thomas Brennan worked as a traveling salesman in rural Pennsylvania in 1967. He covered a territory of 200 miles, visiting small-town hardware stores. He still spent probably 20% of his work hours lost, driving on country roads looking for landmarks. Gas stations were navigation hubs. Every gas station had a rack of local maps. When you stopped for gas, you'd also ask for directions. "How do I get to Sherwood Drive?" The attendant would tell you, sometimes drawing on your map with a pen. Road trips were actual navigation challenges. You'd study maps the night before. You'd calculate mileage. You'd note every town you'd pass through and plan gas stops. If you got lost, and you would get lost, you'd stop at a gas station, buy another map, recalculate. Getting lost was part of travel, part of adventure. Sometimes frustrating, sometimes fun, always memorable. Number 6. Looking things up in encyclopedias or not knowing. Dinner table 1966, Kansas City, Missouri. The Hutchinson family is eating pot roast. Kevin, age 12, asks, "Dad, how far away is Mars?" His father doesn't know. His mother doesn't know. These are the options. Look it up in the encyclopedia. Wait until tomorrow and ask the librarian, or just not know. There's no Google, no Alexa, no smartphone. You can't instantly know something. Information is physical. It lives in books. Books live in specific places. You have to go to those places. The Hutchinsons have Encyclopedia Britannica, 24 volumes, dark blue covers with gold lettering, bought through a door-to-door salesman on a payment plan of $12 per month for 2 years. Kevin's father gets up from dinner. He pulls out volume 14. He flips through pages. Mars. Here we go. Mars is approximately 140 million miles from the Sun at its farthest point, 128 million miles at its closest point. Distance from Earth varies from 35 million to 250 million miles, depending on orbital positions. Kevin asks follow-up questions. Why does it vary? More page flipping. Eventually his father says, "That's all it says here. Ask your teacher tomorrow." That was how knowledge worked. Encyclopedias were expensive, $300 to $400 for a full set, equivalent to $3,000 to $4,000 today. Not every family could afford them. If you didn't have encyclopedias, you went to the library. Libraries were essential infrastructure for accessing information. The card catalog. Wooden cabinets with hundreds of tiny drawers, each containing alphabetized cards listing every book in the library. To find a book, you looked up the subject or author, found the card, wrote down the call number, then navigated the stacks to find the physical book. This took time. Real time. If you needed information for a school report due Friday, you went to the library on Monday. Debates would go unresolved. Someone at a party would say, "I think the Eiffel Tower is 1,000 feet tall," and someone else would say, "No, it's 800 feet, and you'd argue, and no one could prove it. People were wrong about things all the time, confidently wrong. You'd believe incorrect information for years because you had no way to verify it. Being wrong was acceptable because being right was difficult. Knowledge was scarce, physical, and local. You knew what books you had access to, what books your library carried, what newspapers were delivered to your town. Beyond that, you just didn't know, and that was normal. Number 7. Dressing up to fly on an airplane. Summer, 1965. Los Angeles International Airport. Linda Yamamoto is 26 years old, flying from LAX to New York. She's wearing a navy blue suit, matching hat, white gloves, and heels. Her makeup is perfect. Her hair is styled. She's dressed for church, but she's going on an airplane. This was normal. Flying was formal. Men wore suits and ties. Women wore dresses or skirt suits, hats, gloves. Children wore their Sunday best. Not because airlines required it, though some did have dress codes, but because flying was special, expensive, rare, an event. A round-trip ticket from New York to Los Angeles in 1965 cost about $300, equivalent to $3,000 today. The average American made $6,000 per year. A cross-country flight represented weeks of income for most families. In 1965, only 20% of Americans had ever been on an airplane. By 2019, the average American flew 5 times per year. Flying transformed from rare luxury to routine transportation, and dress codes collapsed with it. Airports were elegant. Passengers would arrive hours early to watch planes through massive windows. The Pan Am terminal at JFK had a rooftop cocktail lounge where people would dress up and drink martinis while watching international flights depart. Every seat was first class by today's standards. Seats were wider, more legroom, real meals on china plates with metal silverware and cloth napkins, complimentary alcohol. On long flights, pilots would invite children to visit the cockpit during flight. No security. None. You walked into the airport, checked your luggage at the counter, walked straight to the gate. No metal detectors, no ID checks. Non-passengers could go to the gate. Families would walk their loved ones all the way to the airplane door, kiss them goodbye as they boarded. You could carry anything on board. No restrictions on liquids. People brought bottles of wine, jars of jam, camping knives. No one cared. Pilots and stewardesses smoked in the cockpit. Passengers smoked in their seats. Every plane had smoking sections. Ashtrays were built into armrests. When Linda Yamamoto landed in New York, she collected her luggage from baggage claim and walked out of the terminal in her navy suit and white gloves, looking exactly as elegant as when she boarded in Los Angeles 6 hours earlier. By the 1980s, deregulation made flying cheaper and more accessible. Good for democracy and mobility. But something was lost. The ritual, the formality, the sense that you were doing something special. Number 8. Having no idea where your children were for hours. Saturday morning, June 1967. Oak Park, Illinois. 8-year-old Michael Reynolds finishes his bowl of Frosted Flakes. His mother says, "Be home by dinner." He says okay and walks out the front door. It's 9:15 a.m. His mother doesn't know where he's going. She doesn't ask. Michael doesn't tell her. He just goes outside. He'll come home when he comes home, probably around 5:30 or 6 p.m. when he gets hungry. Until then, he's gone. No cell phone, no GPS tracker, no way for his mother to check on him, contact him, or know his location. This was completely normal. Children left the house in the morning and returned at dinner. Parents had no idea what they were doing or where they were. Michael meets his friends at the park 2 blocks away. They're not scheduled to be there. No texts were sent. They just know that on Saturday mornings kids gather at the park. They play baseball in the field behind the school. They ride bikes to the creek. They build a fort in the woods. They stop at the corner store and buy candy with nickels and dimes. They roam a radius of probably 2 miles from home. They cross busy streets. They go places their parents have never been and will never know about. Children as young as 5 would walk several blocks to school, crossing streets, arriving without adult supervision. After school, children would roam the neighborhood for hours, playing in construction sites, actual active construction sites, with heavy machinery and open foundations, playing in abandoned buildings, climbing trees tall enough that a fall would be catastrophic. Kids broke bones regularly. Stitches were common. You learned to be careful by experiencing consequences. Risk was accepted as part of childhood. Parents understood that children might get hurt, and that was okay. That was how you learned. What changed? Crime didn't increase. Violent crime rates were actually higher in the 1960s and 70s than today. But perception of danger increased. Media coverage of kidnappings became more intense. The 24-hour news cycle emphasizing every tragedy. Technology enabled constant contact. Once cell phones became common, parents could check on children, so they felt they should. Michael Reynolds, now in his 60s, says this: "We had freedom, real freedom. We learned to navigate the world ourselves, how to handle conflicts without adult intervention, how to take risks and manage consequences, how to be resourceful when things went wrong." His grandchildren, ages 7 and 9, have never walked alone to school. They've never spent an afternoon without adult supervision. Independence, self-reliance, the confidence that comes from navigating the world on your own terms. That's what was lost when childhood moved indoors. Number 9. Writing letters and waiting for replies. November 1968. Sarah Martinez is sitting at her kitchen table in San Diego. It's 10 p.m. She's writing a letter to her cousin Maria, who moved to Chicago last year. She uses a pen and lined paper. She crosses out mistakes. She fills 3 pages, front and back. She writes about her job, her classes, a movie she saw, about missing Maria, about wondering if she'll ever stop crying about Tom. Things she could never say in a 3-minute long-distance phone call that costs $5. She seals the letter in an envelope. She writes Maria's address on the front. She walks to the corner mailbox and drops it in. Now she waits. The letter will take 3 to 5 days to reach Chicago. If Maria writes back immediately, Sarah will receive a response in a week. More likely, Maria will write back when she has time, maybe a week after receiving the letter. So Sarah might get a reply in 2 weeks. This was how long-distance relationships worked. Friendship, romance, family, sustained through letters with week-long delays between exchanges. The average American in 1960 mailed 360 pieces of mail per year, most of it letters. By 2010, that dropped to 181 pieces, mostly bills and junk mail. Letter writing was a skill taught in schools. Proper letter format, how to address an envelope, appropriate salutations and closings. Handwriting mattered. Your handwriting was your identity on paper. People recognized letters from loved ones before opening them, just from the handwriting on the envelope. The waiting was agonizing and sweet. Checking the mailbox every day. The disappointment when there was nothing. The joy when you saw that familiar handwriting. Letters were permanent. You could reread them, keep them. Years later, you could pull out old letters and remember exactly what someone was thinking on a specific date in 1968. Bad news came by letter too. That's how Sarah learned Tom was dead, a military telegram, delivered to her door. 2 sentences. We regret to inform you. She dropped to her knees and screamed. Business was conducted by letter. Job applications, official correspondence. Want to order something from a catalog? Fill out the order form, mail it with a check, wait 6 to 8 weeks for delivery. When email emerged in the 1990s, people predicted letters would disappear immediately. But they hung on for a while. Handwriting felt intimate. Now, a handwritten letter is extraordinary. Rare enough to be remarkable. Sarah's cousin Maria did write back. 2 weeks later, Sarah found Maria's response in her mailbox. She sat on her front step and read it twice, crying both times. Maria wrote that she missed Sarah too, that grief takes time, that Sarah should come visit Chicago over Christmas break. They still have some of those letters. Yellowed paper, faded ink, preserved in boxes in their closets. Evidence of a way of connecting that's now essentially extinct. Number 10. Smoking everywhere. Hospitals, airplanes, restaurants. January 1969. Mercy Hospital, Baltimore, Maryland. Dr. Robert Harrison is making his rounds in the cardiac care unit. He stops at each bed, checks charts, talks to patients recovering from heart attacks. He's smoking a cigarette the entire time. This is not unusual. This is Tuesday. Doctors smoked in hospitals. Nurses smoked at nurses' stations. Patients smoked in their beds, even in the cardiac unit. Ashtrays were bolted to hospital bed rails. The hospital cafeteria had a smoking section. You could smoke in the elevator. In 1965, 42% of American adults smoked. Smoking wasn't just common. It was culturally dominant. Cigarettes were advertised on television. Smoking was sophisticated, masculine, glamorous. You could smoke almost anywhere. Offices had ashtrays on every desk. Teachers smoked in classrooms. College lecture halls had ashtrays built into armrests. Restaurants didn't have non-smoking sections because the entire restaurant was a smoking section. You ordered dinner, your waiter brought an ashtray with your silverware. People smoked throughout the meal. Public transportation was smoky. City buses had smoking sections. Train cars had smoking cars. Airplanes, imagine a 6-hour flight in 1969 where half the passengers are smoking continuously. Movie theaters allowed smoking until the late 1980s. You'd watch a film through a haze of smoke. People smoked around newborns, around pregnant women, around asthmatics. Your right to smoke superseded everyone else's right to breathe clean air. Cigarettes were cheap, 30 cents a pack in 1965, equivalent to $3 today. You could buy them from vending machines. No ID required. Children would buy cigarettes for their parents. The Surgeon General's warning appeared on cigarette packs in 1966. Caution, cigarette smoking may be hazardous to your health. Not is dangerous. Not causes cancer. May be hazardous. The cultural shift took decades. In 1987, airlines banned smoking on flights under 2 hours. In 2000, the last airline banned smoking entirely. Workplace smoking bans started in the late 1980s. California banned smoking in restaurants in 1995, and it was controversial. Restaurant owners predicted bankruptcy. Now, you can't smoke in any public indoor space in most of America. Smoking rates have dropped from 42% in 1965 to 14% in 2019. Dr. Harrison, the doctor who smoked during rounds, died of lung cancer in 1994. He quit smoking in 1977 after the hospital banned smoking in patient areas. Too late. That's the world that vanished. Not just the smoking itself, but a culture where damaging your health and everyone else's health was not just acceptable, it was normal. Somewhere in suburban Milwaukee, there's an 84-year-old man named Michael Reynolds sitting in his living room. He's scrolling through his phone now. His grandchildren taught him, reading news, checking the weather. But sometimes he puts the phone down and remembers. He remembers Saturday mornings when he was 8 years old, walking out the door with no destination, no plan, being gone for 10 hours. He remembers writing letters to his best friend who moved to California in 1969. Real letters, on paper, mailed on Monday, replied to 2 weeks later. He remembers his first color TV, bought in 1972. He remembers getting lost driving to his first job interview in 1978, stopping at 3 gas stations to ask for directions, arriving 40 minutes late, still getting hired because getting lost was expected. He remembers smoke, everywhere. His father's cigarette smoke filling the car on road trips, the haze in restaurants. He's lived through massive change. The world of his childhood is gone, not evolved, gone. And sometimes he wonders what his grandchildren are missing, the freedom, the patience, the human connection that required effort. That's what these 10 things represent. Not just activities that disappeared, but an entire way of being human that's been lost. A slower world, a more connected world, paradoxically. A world where you had to wait, had to remember, had to show up in person, had to trust. If you remember the 1960s, like this video and share your story in the comments.